All right. Aloha, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this month's Next Steps program. The Legislative Committee, uphold candidates this election season to gather their thoughts on school media, library specialists, funding for public libraries, and the topics of book banning and censorship. In today's session, the state subcommittee of the legislative committee will share the process of developing the candidate survey and lessons they've learned and the candidates' responses. Our presenters today are Crystal Kakimoto, Tai Arakawa, and Jade Sonouchi. Crystal is a librarian at the Chaminade University, liaising to the nursing, community public health, and Hawaiian Pacific disciplines. She also serves as the operations coordinator at the Bishop Museum in their library and archives. She is currently the state subcommittee chair within the Hawaii Legislative Committee. Tai also works with Crystal at the Sullivan Family Library at Chaminade University, and she has been the circulation supervisor for the Sullivan Family Library for the past 3 years. Previously, she has worked as the library technical assistant at the library. She joined the committee around May of this year and the subcommittee around the same time. She is interested in local policies and laws that affect libraries, librarians, and library users, more so now that she sees what's happening in other states. Jade has been teaching English composition and information literacy for 10 years, mainly at UH West Oahu. She has her BA and MA in English from UH Manoa and is now a UH Manoa Library and Information Science graduate student. She is the president of the American Library Association student chapter at UH Manoa, and she also serves HLA as a board member as a member of the board, conference planning committee, and on the legislative committee. Well, take it away. Thank you.
Well, aloha everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today as we share about our survey. As Tai starts to pull up our slides, I do want to start by saying that we want to make it clear that the views that we express today are that of our speakers and not those of our employers. I think it's going to take 1 second to start the slides. The beginning slides will just go over who we are. Again, my name is Crystal Kakimoto, and I'm going to start by introducing the survey and the project that we created, as well as the aims of the survey. Tai, if you don't mind advancing maybe 3 slides or so. Yeah. Tai will then continue the presentation, and she'll cover the development of the survey itself and the dissemination of the questions. And Jade will discuss the outcomes and the implications of the answers that we received. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Thank you. First, I wanted to talk about the survey and how it was created. And it was just created in a natural discussion that happened in one of our general advocacy committee meetings. Some background on the committee is that it's comprised of about 12 to 15 members, and we all come from the Hawaii Library community. We come from different library backgrounds. So there's public librarians, there's academic librarians. I work in an archive and Jade's a student. We also have some school media library specialists on the committee. And just about 2 months ago, we started having a discussion in a meeting when we were planning our timeline. And someone just kind of threw out the thought, like, I wonder what legislators think about librarians or about libraries in the public or just libraries in general. So as a group, we kind of took a step back and we thought it would be a really great idea to survey the candidates, especially because this was an election year. We did know that it was a tight turnaround though. Again, this was May 2022. And we wanted the answers to be available before the primaries. So just like a general timeline, we started this discussion mid-May 2022. We gave ourselves about 2 weeks to create the questions and think about the mechanism to deliver the survey so that we could deliver the survey to the candidates at the beginning of June. And then we gave them about 2 weeks to respond so that our marketing committee could then work on getting it online or creating any type of social media graphics. Again, it was a very quick turnaround, but this subcommittee just kind of committed to this. And we figured if we could pull this off, this would be fantastic and a really good opportunity to not only survey the candidates, but also share this information with the community. So now I'm going to talk about the scope of the survey. As a lot of you might know, there's a lot of issues related to libraries and archives, and we knew that we would not be able to ask all those questions in this one survey, not only because of the time frame, but also because we don't want to be overwhelming to the candidates and just ask them a ton of questions all at once. So we narrowed it down to 3 areas of interest, and we chose first school media library specialists because we've been talking about it a lot as a committee. There's a decline in the number of school media library specialists, and we're concerned about the adequate funding and the positions. So we knew we wanted to incorporate one of the questions on that. Secondly, we're also concerned about public library funding. We wanted to make sure that, we either maintain the funding or we grow it in coming years. So we wanted to incorporate a question on this topic. And finally, we're also concerned with the rise in censorship and book bannings across the nation. So we wanted to make sure that our questions, and Ty is going to cover the questions a little bit more in depth later, but we want to make sure that the questions address these areas of interest. And then just the scope of the survey. First, we knew we wanted to address all of the statewide candidates. It would be really wonderful if we could do every race and even island specific races, but we knew just based on the timeline and maybe our newness to this survey that we wanted to stick with just a broad statewide policy. We also wanted to mark the goals of the survey. The first was to not only inform the HLA community about what the candidates think about libraries and funding and libraries in the community, but also share this with the general public. And finally, we also had a goal of the survey to hold candidates accountable. I think a lot of us know that there's times when people will talk, but their talk doesn't align with their actions. So we wanted to have some document or something so that if in the event a candidate goes on to back a bill that might hurt a library, or if we start to see censorship bills arise in our community, we have something in writing to hold these candidates accountable too. So now Ty is going to share about the development and the dissemination of the survey.
Okay, so as Crystal said, the committee came up with 3 questions that we wanted to ask. And what we did was first we came up with the general question, and then we wanted to reword them so that they were more open-ended. We wanted to encourage candidates to elaborate on their responses so people could see their thought processes and reasoning. So in this case, instead of just saying, do you believe each public school deserves their own librarian? Of course, most people would say yes, but instead we sort of reworded it so that it becomes, what are your thoughts on the decline in the number of school library media specialists, aka librarians, in public schools? So it sort of forces candidates to not just give one-word answers, and just sort of, some of them wrote actually quite a bit, which is good. And it sort of makes them kind of think about it, if nothing else. So you can see here the, do you support an increase in funding for public libraries? Became, what are your thoughts on increasing funding for public libraries? And what are your thoughts on the trend of censorship and book banning in school and public libraries on the mainland United States? Became, what are your thoughts on the trend of censorship and book banning in schools and public libraries in general? So in creating the survey, we had a discussion about how we were going to disseminate the survey, and we decided that emailing the candidates would be the quickest, most cost-efficient way to send out our survey. So Crystal created a Google form that could be mailed to the candidates. And then we decided on the wording of the message and the introduction, just basically who, what who we were and what we were doing. And we clearly stated that any answers given would be shared with the HLA Legislative Committee and may be used in social media campaigns or maybe circulated within the HLA listserv. So then we had to create a list of candidates to contact. So Cherise was kind enough to find us the list of candidates. I have the link over here for the Office of Elections. And this page is actually updated quite frequently, or periodically. It was actually last updated on the 26th, so 2 days ago. And then Crystal narrowed the list down to the parameters we had set. So basically statewide elections only, no city council or US seats. So we were looking really at the criteria for the state legislature. And we also narrowed it to the larger Republican and Democratic parties. And we still ended up with over 200 candidates on the list. Again, the timing, we wanted to send it before the deadline to file to commit to running. And I will talk about that more in the next slide. So when we contacted the candidates, we used our personal email accounts. And so we sent them out June 1st. And on the timeline, June 2nd was actually the deadline for candidates to file whether they wanted to run. And June 3rd was the deadline to withdraw their candidacy. And so again, we wanted to make sure our survey deadline fell early enough that it was before the primaries, and that by the time it was due, we as a legislative committee had enough time to work with the data to do graphics and organize it so that we could it could be put onto our website. So a couple of candidates that we sent the survey to actually responded to us to acknowledge us or thank us for sending the survey. We actually had one who asked if he could record a video instead. He actually didn't end up recording the video, which was unfortunate. But we did have to emphasize that that June 15th was our hard deadline. And so I believe Crystal closed the survey at midnight on June 16th. So, okay. So now Jade is going to talk about the results.
Thanks, Ty. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be talking about our survey respondents and their responses. So if you could click, please, Ty. Sorry, there's going to be a lot of clicking. Their party affiliations represented, and you can see that we had 39 Democrats respond, and these are from different state races, 7 Republicans. And then to break it down further by the office that the candidates were running for, actually, we did have 1 US representative response, and then 6 who responded and are running for governor, 2 for lieutenant governor, 8 for state senate. And then most of our responses came from the State House of Representatives. Next slide, please. So for each question that we posed that Ty had previously shared, the candidates responded via the Google form, and we decided as a subcommittee to visually represent their responses as a word cloud for each question that highlights words and ideas that they used, and especially the ones that were more frequently used tend to be larger in the word cloud. So as you will see, there's a lot of synonyms and consensus in their responses. And after I preview the survey responses, we will share the link to the candidates' verbatim and complete responses on our website. And we hope this will help you decide who you'd like to support this election season. So for funding public libraries in Hawaii, every candidate that responded shared their support for this. It was definitely a nice consensus to hear, and I'm just going to highlight two responses. The first is Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Keith Amamiya, who wrote, "Absolutely, I would support increasing funding for public libraries. Our libraries are an important gathering place for our community for resources on such a wide range of things. Our libraries are also doing innovative things, including helping to lead our community and workforce into digital literacy through North Star and a depth of online tools and resources." He also added, and his response is really lengthy, that he would encourage the governor, if he were elected, to elevate the state librarian to the cabinet level. And he believes that it can help with cross connectivity between departments. He also recognizes the important role our libraries play as a convener in our communities. And he mentioned he really is interested in supporting ongoing learning and innovation as a state. Republican gubernatorial candidate Lynn Barry Mariano shared, "I think it is long overdue!" Exclamation point. Our communities at large require public libraries. They serve as anchors, safe spaces to learn and grow. As governor, I would fully support transitioning our libraries to serve as critical social infrastructures that our communities rely on. I would work with our newly elected officials, state legislature, Department of Education, Hawaii State Teachers Association, and other stakeholders to enhance funding, to enable hands-on training in basic life skills, language, cultures, etc. And he had a lot more to say. So you can see here that everyone who responded mentioned the word libraries a lot and had many aspects of that that they valued and they would like to see better funded. Next slide, please. So for the question asking for their reaction to the decline in school library media specialists, again, 100% said that they are not in favor of this decline. And there were some candidates that were surprised because they thought it wasn't happening so much. And so they were actually happy to know that it is a problem that they could address. And so for this, I would say that the responses, again, really highlighted, why school library media specialists are so integral in the DOE and really essential to education. But it also brought in some candidates' responses that tie to their personal experiences with libraries. And two examples I'll highlight. The first is from a candidate for House District 35 on Oahu, and that's Waipahu, Waikele, Waipio. Her name is Jolyn Garrison Pietro. And she said, quote, "Once a month, my elementary class would go to the school library where the librarian would hold story time with us. It was perhaps one of my favorite memories of going to school. Afterwards, she would share where the book was in the library and would teach us how to find it. She would also show us how to find any book in the library itself. Maybe some do not see or understand the role of librarians, but it's librarians who create experiences like this that help Hawaii's public school children find the joy of reading and build a stronger educational foundation." And then the second one I'll share is just a quick one from House Representative Scott Saiki, who represents Makali, Kaheka, Kaka'ako, and downtown. And he said, "Some of my fondest childhood memories include going to Kailua Library and reading. School librarians provide invaluable guidance for students about how to safely research and learn about the world. With the expansion of the internet, this is more important than ever. Hawaii needs to provide our students with all of the tools we can to support their learning and development. Libraries and librarians are one of the critical assets that enable our teachers to develop further and students to excel." Next slide, please. So this one is the largest word cloud, and people who responded had a lot to say about censorship and book banning. Generally, what happened here is, most people were appalled. For example, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green called it, quote, "abominable." And a lot of the other candidates were not only really dismayed at the challenges to intellectual freedom and access to information, and the censorship that we see happening, especially on the US continent, but also some did acknowledge there should be some types of limits to access, especially for keiki regarding sexually explicit materials. Particularly, they mentioned pornographic ones. And one response I'm going to highlight is just from candidate House Representative, a candidate for House Representative Kim Koko Iwamoto, and she represents she would represent the same district as Scott Psyche, so they're campaigning against each other. She said, "I am opposed to censorship and book banning. Growing up as a queer young person in the 80s, I spent all my time in the library looking for fiction and nonfiction representations that affirmed and validated who I was and who I might become. These are the lives they're looking to erase from our society. As for the censorship of books that mark a specific time in our racist, sexist, genocidal history, I think those books are important reminders of that era and the social mores of that time. They should be discussed with this context so we do not forget how far we have come or how we have circled back to similar circumstances." Okay, so next slide, please. So this is just a summary of what our survey findings showed. And across the aisle, the responses unanimously favored more funding for public libraries in Hawaii, disapproved of the decline in DOE school library media specialists, agree that censorship and book banning trends infringe on intellectual freedom. And a bunch of the responses included that this presents a, quote, dangerous slippery slope. And finally, there were some really positive personal experiences with Hawaii's libraries and librarians shared in these responses. So next slide, please.
So now we wanted to share a couple helpful links. The first link is going to direct you directly to the survey, so you can go ahead and read through what all of the candidates said. The second link is going to be to, thanks Jade. So Jade will be including the links in the chat area. The second link will take you to the state legislature's website. And then the third and fourth link are going to be ways for you to find who your representatives are. So we do recommend that you check who your representatives are and then check the survey to see if they did respond, and if they did, what are their sentiments. Next slide, please. So before we open the floor to open discussion, we do want to promote Ellen's Next Steps session. Ellen is on the Legislative Advocacy Committee with us, and she'll be presenting on August 25th at 12 p.m. about, I think, participating in library advocacy and the ethics of it. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we can have some open discussion about the survey or about the responses or any questions that you have for us. And if not, we have a couple questions prepared to ask you folks.
Oh, I apologize. The earlier were not all links, but now you can find the links that we recommend that you check out.
One thing that when we were making the presentation is when we were going over the questions, it came up that, we should have maybe asked like how everybody said, yes, we should fund, but maybe, I guess because we're so new, we're like, oh, we should have asked them, what would be your plan on how to get the funding? But I think maybe for next time, that would be another question to include, but we're a bit new to this, so it didn't come up until after the fact.
I know that I think this was a good learning experience, and it kind of leads to the question of maybe to the larger group and to the subcommittee, what topics do you think we could focus on in the next year's survey? Or what topics would you even ask your own representative if you're face to face with them? We have a lot of issues in Hawaii regarding libraries and archives. So, I mean, would Native Hawaiian resources be an issue we could talk about, or just things that you're interested in also?
Hi, everyone. I just had a comment to make. Thank you. This is a really interesting and great presentation. One thing that I've been noticing, and that I heard in your presentation about how the candidates were very, nostalgic about their past experiences, getting school library stories when they were young. And, what we're facing today with COVID is that we now don't gather. And libraries, I'm only focused on these days on academic libraries, but we're all digital, right? Everything, there's not a lot of gathering going on. And I don't know if this is like a particular question about the survey, but maybe for our library community and our archives community, how do we strategize for services or forms of like social gathering during this time of COVID, or to meet those needs that people say that they really loved about libraries in the past, but we can't really replicate it now because of COVID? And how do we address that?
That's a really good point. And it is something that I'm reading about right now in Palaces for the People. Talks about that space for community, social infrastructure, how libraries and parks and community centers can do that. And I mean, we could ask them. It wouldn't hurt to ask, how can we get more funding for programs to be administered at public libraries? Or how can we bridge the gap maybe between a specific community center and bring in the library to that space, so that libraries aren't just in the buildings that we think of with libraries?
I agree. And what Crystal mentioned is really important, but also what Ellen Ray just shared, I think, is something that we can consider, but also something that some candidates lightly touched on when they were responding, because some of them went above and beyond what the questions asked. And so a few of them did, jump in with recommendations on where they would get the funding, or who they would try to negotiate with, or how they would maybe include the community in discussions over things like book banning or censorship. And I thought that was really interesting to see, already they're thinking about that. And in the chat, Ty shared, or I'm sorry, the Hawaii Library Association shared the more direct link to the survey results.
To address Malia's question, we don't have a list of the candidates that declined or didn't complete, but we can pull that up really quick, because it would be wonderful to see the list in one place, maybe over the coming days, because we have all of the lists on the back end, so we could just post that. It was interesting. We got a few responses super quick, and then they stopped coming in altogether. I think given the timeline, we were surprised with how many people did respond, but like Ty said, there was over 200, so there could have been a lot more answers.
One thing I want to say is, yeah, it's interesting I agree with Amelia. I think it'd be interesting to see the list of candidates who declined, or I'm not really sure because then it's a survey, right? So if they don't fill it out, it's not sort of like a decline, they just didn't fill it out, right? It's interesting to see the people who respond with like a more lengthy and thorough response in terms of funding. I've looked at this list before, but every time I look at it, I'm fascinated to see even some responses I've missed. Like there is one person that's running for state senate, and he really went in deep and looked at our HSPLS's website. And the thing that I found very interesting and surprising from this survey is that it puts libraries in these candidates' minds, things that they never considered. So, and had made them curious about libraries. Like like this survey probably made this candidate go to our website, find out where does the public library's funding comes from, and I'm not going to say I'm not in his district, but I was really impressed by his response and that he took the time to research that information. Another thing too is being part of the HLA board. We had someone request to join our listserv, and the board were kind of confused, like, who is this person? Why, he wasn't a librarian. When I saw his name, I noticed that he's one of the people that responded to the candidates. So that too made me think, wow, people are slowly finding us out, because I think as librarians we tend to kind of be very meek and very humble about things, but this group is sort of slowly introducing ourselves to these candidates or potential people who will be in charge of funding. And so I think that's one of the interesting things that came out of this survey, put us on the map. So, thank you.
Yeah, and that connection is what I think our subcommittee wants to continue for the rest of the year. Our goal is to create kits to, in November, when we meet the legislators, to give them something, a brochure, so they can know this is this organization, this is who their members are, what they stand for, so that when they see libraries, they think HLA, or when they, see a book, they think of community. We want to start making more connections like that.
I also want to say that plays into the library ecosystem, because these people are our stakeholders, and when they're educated about what we do, what libraries are do, then it's a better connection. And then maybe future, if they come across bills that are library related, they understand things that we can do and also things that we can't do, because there are sometimes there are bills where like, huh, the libraries aren't preschools. So yeah.
Also, our cqrsengage.com site, I'll just quickly share what that looks like. And if I can click on this. So basically, this is our advocacy website that one of our legislative committee members has been updating very well for us. And it does state the goals, but this is where you can find out what we've been doing regarding political candidates' views on the questions that we've asked. And so the link to the sheet is here at the top of this. But there's also a marketing tool. This is more for people who aren't so familiar with libraries, but as Charisse mentioned, Hawaii's information ecosystem, it's really visually nicely represented here. And then there's some other updates with links to news stories or media coverage that touch on some things that are very important to our state. Oh, and regarding Malia's question, yes, I think as Ty has responded in the chat, we know that maybe some people perhaps didn't want to respond with negative comments, or we're getting that impression, but we don't have evidence of that. What we do know, though, is on the form, there was a disclaimer that, if you don't respond, HLA may mention in our social media or when we put out the survey results that these candidates did not respond. So they kind of had fair warning that if you don't respond, that could be on record.
That's because of the timing of it. It went out before the final deadline to formally file to commit to running. So I know my current senator, I was the one that ended up sending out the email to him. And I thought, oh, that's really weird that he didn't respond. And I got my mail-in ballot, and he's not even on the ticket. So he didn't have actually like, he decided not to run. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that could be why.
To follow up on Malia's comments about wondering, if the ones that didn't respond just didn't want to go on the records of negative review, I will let you say there is a somewhat of a negative review of public libraries that was submitted from a candidate, and it was very interesting. Again, I don't want to name names, but you could definitely find it within the spreadsheets. And so there were people who are very bold with their comments, but it's good. We want to hear what people think, and it's good that people that feel confident in whether they have to say positive or negative. But it's good that we also got a lot of positive feedback. Are there any comments or questions maybe from the committee?
I think just from myself, I wanted to thank Jade and Ty because this was a super quick turnaround. It was a lot of work in just about a week or two, and even creating this slideshow. We're also going to be working on an article for the HLA newsletter for the people who couldn't attend this or the people who'd rather read an article about this. So just kudos to you folks for being along this ride, and we're going to do it again, I think, right?
Oh, thank you, Crystal and Ty, and Charisse for hosting this.
Oh, definitely. Charisse and Crystal have been putting in a lot of legwork, especially.
Yeah. Yes, and I think you guys are doing a great job as a subcommittee within our committee in keeping us together. And if there's no questions, we'll do a little wrap up. One comment says here, I wonder if this committee might list specifically some of the special programs that different libraries have, especially those that serve underrepresented groups, to highlight the work and what more funding would do for these programs to make these people more aware of the needs. That could be something to be considered, especially when we do like face-to-face advocacy. Hopefully in the future, that's something that we can talk about with them. But I think this survey is a nice intro to our, not just committee, but also our community. Well, I want to say this definitely helped me. I got my ballots in the mail recently, and reading this, and also a little shout out to Civil Beat. They also do these candidate survey questions, and all of that kind of stuff is very helpful in making my choice for who to vote for. And so this concludes our program. I want to thank everyone for joining us this month. Next month, like Crystal had mentioned, we are going to continue on with our legislative committee. All of us have been working really hard in providing content for our members. So next month we have Ellen Ray Cachola. She will do a presentation on our advocacy committee's strategies, recruitment, and leadership development ideas. And for those, if you have any comments or maybe ideas for future programming, please feel free to email me. And so today's program has been made possible through HLA members like you. And to join or to continue our support, please check out our social media, and have a good day, and definitely check out the survey and vote. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.